everybody to the November 10th, 2020 Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting. We have a fairly full agenda for today. I wanted to just take a moment to congratulate the winners of the election. We will hopefully hear something from our administrator later as to the results and how many people voted in Lane County, but we will be seeing a new county commissioner come on board in January. And so I congratulate her as well. We have we have two executive sessions planned today, and they can be taken separately depending on the time that we have this morning or this afternoon. They're approximately a half an hour each, and we do have a 10:30 time certain as well. So I will read in our normal information for the public, and then we'll get going. So for
pardon my interruption. I have no audio on my computer, so I'm audio on my phone, visual on the computer. I apologize for the interruption.
Got it. For the public that's watching the meeting, when you're registering the meeting, you're registered in our system as attendees. Attendees are just webinar participants who are simply viewers of the meeting. Your microphone and your webcam are automatically muted as attendees. However, there will be a time during the meeting where we will have it open for public comment. When that time comes, and if you wish to participate, you can just raise your virtual hand. You should see a hand icon on your device and just click it once. When the public comment begins, our moderator will call names, and when your name is called, you'll be given 3 minutes for public comment. When your 3 minutes is up, you'll go back into muted status and the next person will be called. You can then continue to watch the webinar as long as you choose. We'll try to give everyone who wishes to present public comment an opportunity to speak, but please note, in the event that there are more people wishing to speak than the time allows, I may need to limit the number of speakers, reduce the time per speaker, or select speakers randomly. We haven't had to do that, and hopefully we will not have to do that today as well. With that, we will move on into our agenda. And we'll start with item 1. Are there any adjustments to the agenda from anyone? Okay, don't see any. We'll move on to emergency business. Is there any emergency business? Don't see any. Okay, we'll move straight into our public comment then. So if you're interested in giving us some public comment, feel free to raise that hand icon on your device and I will turn it over to our moderator.
Chair Buck. At this time, we will begin our public comment portion. I will call your name and I will unmute your microphone, and then the timer will begin and you may begin your public comment. Our first speaker will be Alexis Biddle. I hope I didn't do too bad of a job on your name. I will unmute your microphone and start your timer. Alexis, I show you are self-muted.
Got it. I hope you can hear me now. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Alexis Biddle, and I'm representing 1,000 Friends of Oregon. I'm here today to talk about urban reserves first, and I'm hoping later this afternoon to talk about the floodplain development prohibition. Urban reserves serve an important purpose. Among them, they give greater certainty to property owners and residents about the long-term designations of their land. An unintended outcome, however, of urban reserves is that it subverts one of the hallmarks of Oregon's land use system, which is the protection of our most valuable farm and forest land. By designating an urban reserve, prime farmland can be added to an urban growth boundary as easily as less valuable partially developed land that is not viable for farming or forestry. We support the Planning Commission's recommendation for the principle of farmland last through adopting a policy that will only add soils classed 1 and 2 after all other types of land are included first. But we ask that the commissioners take a longer view and protect classes 3 and 4 as well. And while these classes are not as productive as classes 1 and 2, classes 3 and 4 soils do support a variety of crops and grazing for livestock and dairy. So I just ask that we take a long view and look at our food system and consider food scarcity in the future, as well as climate change and other long-term needs that demand that we really consider how valuable our farmland is in the long run. So I appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully you'll be able to hear from me again later about the floodplain development ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is Dharmika Henschel. Dharmika, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Hi. Thanks for taking a few minutes to listen to me this morning. I live in West Eugene in the Train Song neighborhood, and a number of Eugene residents and people in the unincorporated area of River Road have been left sleepless in the early morning hours due to a planer operated outside at Zippo Laminators on West First Avenue in Eugene. After being woken up several days a week since May, I found about 20 others online in October, many of whom are in the unincorporated areas of River Road up to 4 miles away from Zippo Laminators, being woken regularly by this noise. The other day I canvassed a block near me and found that 7 out of 12 households closer to Zippo Laminators have lost sleep. It's a loud whining sound that vibrates through windows and earplugs. It can start at 4 or 5 in the morning and go on for hours. Sounded like a power tool or shop vac. The first time I heard it, I thought my neighbor was operating. That's how loud it is. The planer's in the north end of the building, partially out in the open, and the noise it makes is magnified by the large metal warehouse and is sent out through the open doors to the north. I don't understand why Zippo can't operate after 7 in the morning. They don't operate, it's 24 hours a day. The sound regularly reaches 60 decibels and often averages between 50 and 55 decibels. Even when the decibel level is lower, it still wakes people. It's not just a matter of the decibels, it's a loud whining motor that reverberates at a frequency that disturbs sleep. So why am I approaching you as the Lane County Commissioners? Well, I wrote Pat Farr the other couple weeks ago. I haven't heard back yet. So I talked to a Lane County code person who returned my call and said that Lane County defers to the city for noise generated within the city. First of all, I'm not clear if that also applies to noise generated within city limits that's waking up people in unincorporated areas of River Road. But also there's a hole in the city code where these commercial areas are allowed to operate unless they average 60 decibels for an hour, even at night. Whereas the county code says that at night you can't reach over 50 decibels at all. And so there's a discrepancy there. And although we did go to the city to deal with the discrepancy there, I thought you also should be aware of it and perhaps work with the city to figure out a solution to this so that the rest of us can get some sleep. That has been going on for over 6 months and it'll continue if it's not addressed. Please don't give them an exemption or variance either. And thank you for your time.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is William Carpenter. Mr. Carpenter, if you would like to unmute your microphone, I will begin your timer and you can begin your public comment.
Yes, good morning, commissioners. I know a few of you. Reason I'm calling is I think there may be some deficiency in the COVID reporting requirements throughout the county. I was trying to find the COVID levels in the Springfield Municipal Jail yesterday, and I contacted the Lane County hotline. They said they didn't have that information, so I contacted the Springfield Municipal Jail. They said they wouldn't give me that information because of HIPAA requirements, but it's odd that your own correction facility posts the COVID numbers weekly in the jail, and also obviously the University of Oregon is able to post their COVID numbers. I think you have a real susceptible population, and based on what's happened in El Paso County, Colorado, it is generally a possible super spreader site. So I'd like to have you folks check in with your own public health people to see why the regional jails in the community are not more transparent on their COVID numbers. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. I do show one more person is on for public comment, and I think you would like to speak. Leola Bell, I'm going to unmute your microphone, and if you would like to begin your public comment, you can. I don't see your hand raised, but I think we talked and you would like to give public comment. One moment. You are self-muted. There you go.
Hi, my name is Leola, and I'm basically here for the same reason as Dharmika. I live a couple blocks away from where she does. This has been going on for me for longer than May, but they wake us up anywhere from 4 o'clock in the morning on. This morning, I woke up at 5:30. It was only in the 30s and 40s today. Yesterday, it was in the 40s. Most days it's in the 50s. Sometimes it's been in the 60s. And I have a lot of health issues that I really need my rest. And if I don't, like I had 2 hours sleep last night from sickness and stuff. And though I finally got to sleep, even though I was exhausted, it woke me up. It is a really loud noise. I mean, even in the 30s and 40s, it woke me up this morning. So it just makes my illness harder to conquer. Like today, my husband left to go out of town to work, and I'm not going to be able to function to go out and drive and do stuff, at least for a while, for anything that needs to be done. So I just ask, I'm not against business. I don't want them to, get in trouble or anything like that. That's not what I'm asking. I'm just asking for a solution. Like 7 a.m., I totally understand, I think during the day it wouldn't be as noticeable because there's other noises and stuff, and most people are awake by 7. Just asking for some consideration on their part for all of us that have been dealing with this. And supposedly it's supposed to go on for another year before they're able to put it inside. So that's basically where I'm coming from. I don't have a lot more to add than what she did.
Thank you for your public comment. Chair Buck, at this time, that is all of the people we have signed up for public comment, so I will return the meeting over to you.
Thank you, everybody, for giving public comment this morning. I'll move on to Commissioner's response. Is there any response? Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much for this opportunity for remonstrance and response to public comment. I'll first respond to public comment by saying thank you so much to all of you for taking the time to present your testimony to the board. Everyone has raised important issues, and I hope staff has listened to the public comment and that to the extent staff can respond to it. With respect to announcements, it's my great privilege to announce that it appears that Lori Trieger has been elected by the people of the South Eugene District to the position number 3 on the Lane County Board of Commissioners. Her election will be certified later, and County Administrator will go into some detail, I guess, about when the certification of the election takes place, and she'll be sworn in and take office on January 4, 2021. It's really a great thing for our community that a leader of Lori's background has chosen to run for and then be chosen by the voters of the South Eugene District to serve in this position. She is the first woman to have been elected to the South Eugene District seat. She is the 3rd person in Lane County history, the other 2 being Jerry Russ and myself. And so she will bring a tremendous amount of background from her service in the many nonprofits she's worked in our community. And I am so pleased to be part of the peaceful, orderly, and friendly transition of authority from me to her, And I'm looking forward to working with her in this transition. And I hope the board will be welcoming her to the board. And thank you very much.
Commissioner Farr. We can't hear you, unfortunately.
Can you hear me now? Okay, good. I'm speaking through my phone audio. I apologize for that. Ms. Henschel, thank you very much for your comments regarding Zippo. You know, we live just a couple of miles from your house, and we have an upstairs window. And when the window is open at night, I can hear the whine as well as the train switching in that area. I can hear it from a distance. I noticed after your messages to me and Claire Syrett, both Mayor Vinnis and Claire Syrett have been talking with you about city code. I will follow through with that, and I'll talk to both Claire Syrett, Councilor Syrett, who is your councilor, but also Councilor Evans, who is in this general area as well. And we will follow through on that. I will send you my response, I'll send you a text link for me so we can be in textual contact a little bit more directly. I do live just a couple of miles from you, and I am very well aware of the noise. And I was presuming that the city is moving forward on that, and I will follow through on it. Thank you. Chair Buck, I also wanted to mention a op-ed that was written by Rick Kincaid that was published in the Register Guard. And Dr. Kincaid is the head of our community health centers. I serve as the board liaison to Community Health Council, which Dr. Kincaid is a part of. I just wanted to mention something that Dr. Kincaid said in his very well-written article, which I hope everybody has read. If you haven't, there is a link. I've sent out a link to it. Dr. Kincaid says, in Lane County, our CHCs serve more than 25,000 residents each year, providing comprehensive primary care, integrated behavioral health, dental services, substance use treatment, and specialty behavioral health care, regardless of race, ethnicity, disability, gender identity, and sexual orientation. And he goes on to talk about the single purpose that all the doctors and staff are dedicated to, and that is improving the care and well-being of our patients and families. That article is very well written, and it does give a deep insight as to how our community health centers operate and how the federal government is foregoing the support that has been promised to the community health centers. I have sent that link out, and I hope that everybody has a chance to read Dr. Kincaid's superb article. Thank you, Chair Buck. And Ms. Henschel, I will be in touch with you currently.
Thank you. Any other response? Commissioner Burney?
I just want to also personally thank the 4 presenters who presented. I recognize that you don't get up in the morning and go through the gymnastics of getting online these presentations because it's convenient for you. I understand that you sincerely reverberate to the sentiments you're discussing. 3 of the 4 comments this morning are out of the authority of the Lane County Board of Commissioners, but nonetheless, I think they're legitimate. And as with Commissioner Farr, I also will endeavor to see if we can't get answers for you. But thank you very much.
Any other response? All right, I don't see any. So thank you again, everybody who called in. We will move on to item 5 on our agenda. First, item A, COVID-19 response and recovery. And we have Mr. Mokrzyski, our administrator, and Karen Gaffney, our director of Health and Human Services.
Thank you, Chair. I'll turn it over to Karen for an update on COVID-19 response and recovery. And I believe she'll be able to answer the question that was raised under public comment about data reported out of the Springfield Municipal Jail. Karen?
I'm having a little. So I'm having trouble with my audio. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. I'm not sure what's what's going on with that, but if there's a problem, give me a signal and I'll stop. My part of the presentation this morning is actually going to be fairly brief because we will be sharing Austin, trying to work with my screen here. Austin will be sharing his screen and walking through the focus on business this morning. So I do have a few updates that I would like to share. And the first is, of course, our usual plan. Last week we focused a lot on schools, and so I just wanted to refresh your memory that there actually are these 5 elements in our plan. And so today, after I give the basic updates on data for the first couple priorities, we're going to focus on priority area number 3, the economic impacts on businesses and individuals. So that's our focus for today.
Karen,
yes.
Just to let you know, depending on what you think you're sharing, we just see your desktop.
Well, that is not good. Okay. You'd think after all these weeks, I would have gotten this down. Let's see. For whatever reason, I'm not, do you have the epi curve now? Okay. Thank you, Chair Buck. All right. So this is much more interesting than my desktop, I'm sure, for everyone who's viewing from home. This is our current picture of our epi curve. And, you know, I'm sorry to say that our fears about Halloween have been coming to fruition. And for those of you who track our case numbers on a daily basis, you will have noticed that we have been seeing upticks in lab reports that are coming in. As you recall, the epi curve actually is keyed to onset of symptoms, so not so much the days that the lab reports come in, but you can see that people right after Halloween, we start seeing the uptick in numbers. As of today, we have 2,934 people who have been diagnosed with COVID-19 during the course of the epidemic in Lane County. Currently, we have 281 people who are infectious, and that, to say, is a significant increase from where we were a little more than a week ago when we were starting to see those numbers tick down. 16 of those people are hospitalized, and we have had 32 deaths of people in Lane County thus far during the pandemic. So it's time again for us to really focus our efforts on those strategies that we know will make a difference in diminishing the transmission of disease. As of yesterday, we had 565 people under monitoring in Lane County. And as a reminder to the viewing public, those are people who have been direct contacts of people who have COVID-19 and who are quarantining. And of those 565 people, 39 of them are primarily Spanish-speaking individuals. We also have seen significant increase in demand for our services at River Avenue. Over the weekend, we were at 30, which is our highest to date, and we are working hard to equip additional parts of that building to be able to expand further. And that is our alternative care facility where we're able to help people isolate or quarantine when they can't do that in their own homes. And we have seen a significant increase in the number of people who need that facility. If it's a family, we need to use hotels because that facility at River Avenue is really for adults. But I will tell you that I'm so grateful again that we have that facility in our community, and I'll let you know that it is being well used in helping to both create diversion from the hospital and also to make sure that people are quarantining safely so we can help contain the spread of disease. Besides Halloween, I would say that we've seen increases in outbreaks in long-term care facilities. We've had a couple of those, and as you know, we worry significantly about those settings because people are so vulnerable to serious disease in long-term care facilities. And we are working closely with the Oregon Department of Human Services and Oregon Health Authority to make sure that we contain the spread in both long-term care facilities and of course our other congregate settings. And then I think before I turn it over to Austin to talk about our business plan, I do want to share a couple other of the key indicators that we typically look at our weekly update. So this is Lane County's public health indicators compared to the overall state average. And you'll see that we have green checks in a couple important places. Our trend in positivity has gone down to 6.2. Our target is to really keep that below 5%, so we still have a ways to go. And our percentage of new cases for this reporting period did show that decline we were looking at. In terms of what we see next week, I think we're going to be on that same wave that the rest of the state is, and really seeing increased number of cases with that data. And then the governor's watch list. We remain on the governor's watch list, which is different than the list of counties she placed on pause last week. So I know we have a couple different things moving in this universe. The governor's watch list is specifically focused on counties with high levels of sporadic transmission, so cases that we aren't able to connect with each other. And I wanted to share with you the statewide data as well as Lane County's data, and you can see that for this 2-week reporting period from October 4th through the 31st, the state did start to tick up in their numbers. The overall sporadic cases per 100,000 statewide was above the 50% mark. And Lane County was actually trending down, although we still are above the state average for that period at 57.5 per 100,000. So with that, I'm going to ask Diana to switch you over to Austin as the presenter so you can see his screen and give you a more thorough update on our strategy around business. So Austin, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Let me find the right screen. Let's see. Is my screen showing at this point? And does it have the timeline at the top? May, June, July? Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Karen. I appreciate it. And good morning, Chair Buck and commissioners. It feels a bit strange for me to put on the COVID hat for a moment and provide an update given the other work going on, but I did want to update you on where we are, particularly with all of the funding rounds that we've been deploying to our small business community throughout the county. I planned on doing a very concise verbal update and then realized that there are, at this point, 5 funding rounds, all with different rules, going back to May. And so I thought I might provide a little bit more context just to make sure there's some clarity here. So, I think it's also important to note what's not reflected on this page is the program that Lane County, Eugene, and Springfield put together in March to respond pretty quickly to what we were seeing our business community struggling with. And so after that, and after initial PPP and EIDL rolled out, there were rounds 1 and 2 from Business Oregon. So these were the first rounds of the Emergency Business Assistance Program. So that RFP was released in May. Basic rules for eligibility were that businesses cannot have received PPP or EIDL, and grant amounts range from $2,500 to $25,000. Collectively, with several of our city partners, we put together an application for $630,000, providing a one-to-one match as required. We ended up only receiving $100,000, which hurt, I'll admit. And then in round 2, CLW ended up getting $125,000, which was much less than we had hoped. We received these funds in July from the state, and so by that time, a lot of businesses had received PPP and EIDL, and so it made it incredibly difficult to find eligible businesses because it didn't matter what the amount of PPP or EIDL was at that point. And so we've actually been struggling to deploy those funds up until October. While some of this was happening, we then got into round 3 from Business Oregon. So for this round, we had heard and there had been indications that businesses who received PPP and EIDL would not be excluded, which was true, but any PPP and EIDL they received had to be subtracted from their Business Oregon grant amount, which did not solve the problem because the grant amounts were so small. Most businesses received more than that grant amount and immediately were not eligible to receive funds. We received $400,000 in round 3, which we were excited about. less excited about the eligibility requirements. And we were hearing from partners statewide that they were having the same challenge. So with a statewide group of partners, we began to advocate, and with the support of the board, to the legislature and the e-board to make changes that would better meet the needs of our businesses. E-board met in late September and ended up making those changes we asked for, but to round 4 and not round 3. So we were excited to see changes, but it didn't necessarily help our business community immediately. We then were left with a choice, right? We had been working on setting up a local CRF funded grant program with several of our cities, recognizing the issues with the state funding requirements, as well as just seeing the increasing need from our business community. So we chose to deploy this local CRF grant program first in the best interest of our businesses. And with all of our cities and us pitching in, we were able to come up with $630,000, which we replicated the loan program from March, but it was a grant product instead of a loan. And grant amounts were 5,000, 10,000, or 20,000, depending on employment, up to 25 FTE. And we did not have PPP idle restrictions or subtractions. We then, in the middle of all that, Community Lending Works received their round 4 allocation, which was $455,000, which had all of the great changes we had been asking the e-board and the legislature for. So we prioritized that funding as well, distributed a lot of that funding, all of it is currently spoken for, and are now in the midst of attempting to deploy round 3. And even using the wait list from all these other programs, we only have 11 eligible applicants at this point, which are currently being processed. Ultimately, we have a lot of businesses, once they realize they have to subtract their PPP and idle and will only get a few $100s, they choose not to do that. We now have learned about round 5, which is a future round, which any unspent funds from all over the state from rounds 1 through 3 will be redeployed and rolled into a round 5, which will have the round 4 rules, which is good. And the applicant for this round will again be CDFIs like Community Lending Works. So they're getting ready to do that. To better illustrate how much unspent funds we have, despite our efforts to put together this table, you can see, so our emergency loan program, $400,000 in March, got it out the door right away. Rounds 1 and 2, we have $6,000 remaining, and that's what we've been trying to deploy up until October last month. Round 3 is the largest remaining funds. So that's the one where we received $400,000. Funds remaining is a little bit up in the air because of those 11 eligible applicants. So we'll have to see how many end up choosing to receive those funds. And then we're estimating between rounds 1 and 2 and round 3 that we will likely be returning somewhere in the $380,000 range to the state to roll over into a round 5. Round 4, which is the $455,000 that was received by Community Lending Works, is all spoken for and over. The local CRF grant program I talked about, that $630,000 has been deployed, and on round 5 is to be determined depending on what we receive. So I am really disappointed to have to return money to the state, but I will say, given the circumstances and given the needs of our business, I believe we made the right decision to prioritize funding that would actually help them at the risk of having some round 3 funds remaining. So high level overview of where we're at and all the many rounds. I'll likely have a new update soon as we learn more about round 5 and what that entails.
Hey, Chair Buck, I think that we are available for questions from the board.
Very good, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? I am not seeing any. Commissioner Burney?
First, a comment. It felt like we just received 2 fundamentally different reports on fundamentally different aspects, and it's very hard, and they both have a lot of gravity to them. So it's very hard to respond to 2 things at this moment. But Karen, the numbers, unless I'm reading them incorrectly, don't look good. They don't look good. We've been trying as a body to avoid mandating anything beyond what the state has already mandated in terms of mask wearing. I question the enforcement capacity to enforce mandates, but nonetheless, based on that data that you shared, what is your recommendation for actions we can or cannot take moving forward?
Chair Buck, Vice Chair Bernie, thank you. That's a really great question. And I have a couple thoughts on that particular piece. And it's interesting to listen to the governor's remarks on Friday, as clearly at a statewide level, she's struggling with the same question of how do we really shift the dynamics. When we look at where our transmission is happening, as I said, we have some significant long-term care outbreaks, and those are particularly worrisome for us because of the serious impacts of disease on that population. And it appears as if it's staff members who are positive, because clearly that population is not very mobile, and it doesn't appear for the most part to be coming in from visitors. So working with our long-term care facilities to make sure that we're doing testing for those staff. I would say the other outbreaks, when we talk about Halloween, which is what I was hearing a lot this weekend from our case investigators, it's not a situation where people aren't wearing their mask when they go to the grocery store. These are people who are choosing to do gatherings, largely indoor gatherings where we know the risk of transmission is higher. And that's where we're seeing problems. And I think the other interesting thing that's happening is an increase in the number of people who are going to work when they don't feel well. So I think that's a piece we don't talk about as much in these updates as we might. That particularly as we head into the winter, I think people are sometimes feeling like they just have a cold and so they shouldn't worry about it, or it's just a headache. It's really, really important as we see these larger numbers of workplace outbreaks that people monitor their own symptoms. And if they are not feeling well, to please not go to work, don't go to the store, don't go to a party, all of those places where we're seeing transmission that's coming from people who are actually ill. So those are a few of my thoughts. And I think I would just lean into some of what the governor said statewide, which is particularly as we start heading toward Thanksgiving and even smaller gatherings now, if you have them, please cancel them. Because that's where we're seeing transmission really happening in the community. And if I might just take another 30 seconds to amplify an example she gave, is that if you have, if you have 5 people over for dinner one night, and then 2 nights later have your family come by, and then at the end of the week meet with your neighbors, each setting might be fewer than 6 people, but it's the cumulative effect of that that is really amplifying the spread of disease in the community. So I think that's what we need to do.
I would just mention that in our neighborhood, we had the busiest Halloween that we've ever had. It was lovely weather. I think parents and children were going crazy being inside and not being able to see friends. 90% of them were wearing masks anyway of one type or another, not what we're talking about. And of course, my wife adores children and tried to make a safe kind of mechanism where she could talk to them, but they were getting candy. It's just very difficult. Okay, well, I wanted to acknowledge those numbers because they're not positive, and we keep hearing the national news talking about what looks like a very difficult winter against the desire to get together with friends and family and grandchildren that we want to hug, and it's just very hard. So I agree, this is going to be a real test. One other comment as it relates to Austin's presentation. It's hard when I hear you, Austin, not to feel like sometimes electeds, especially at the state level, or agency people, seem to need to put their stamp on a rule as it relates to getting resources out when we're in a moment where those dollars just need to get out to businesses. And I'm ready for you to tell me this is incorrect, but in my opinion, we ought to just simply allow counties to make decisions that would not create prohibitive rules in a moment where dollar flow is critical. And I really am sorry to hear some of the, the good, the bad, and the ugly that you presented to us. But thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Did you say Commissioner Farr, Chair Buck? Sorry, thank you. I have two things, Ms. Gaffney. The first is regarding Mr. Ramirez. Man, I tell you what, the work you are doing is astounding. It's piled on top of the other things that you do on a regular basis. I pass her in the hallway from time to time, and it is just impressive the amount of work you're able to process and pass forward reports. I think Commissioner Burney mentioned that your reports were kind of crossing over lines and really addressing two very in-depth reports, both of which I have found you to be very much on top of Austin. Thank you very much. And Ms. Gaffney, thank you for the teamwork that's provided to Austin to allow him to provide this special level of attention. The second is a little bit more of a question that's up in the air. Like at least 100,000 other people in Lane County, I watch college football. It's pretty common. People love it. It's entertaining, whatever reason you like to watch it. And I watched the Oregon game versus Stanford this weekend, which had cutout figures in the stands. And it was pretty entertaining for us watching on TV. A little bit less of an event for the people playing, but it's not about them, it's about us, right? Just kidding. But significantly, when I watched the game at Notre Dame at South Bend, Indiana, there was a fairly large audience, well separated with masks. And when I watched the game at the other Austin, Texas, University of Texas, there were lots of people there, many of whom were in large groups without masks. Can you comment on what we are doing here that's differently in Oregon, which provides for no people in the stadiums, compared to Indiana, which has some people but pretty well controlled, compared to Texas, which seems to be a free-for-all?
Chair Buck, Commissioner Farr, thank you for acknowledging that piece in the rules, both for Autzen Stadium and Reser Stadium, both. There was significant discussion in Oregon about whether or not it made sense to be able to have Pac-12 football play, and how could we do that safely. And I do want to give lots of credit to Dr. Ludke, our senior health officer, who has been part of those negotiations, both at the Pac-12 level, as well as here in Oregon with Oregon State and the University of Oregon. Much of this really is about finding ways that we can do things safely. And Dr. Ludke spent 2 hours touring Autzen Stadium before the final agreement was made to make sure that they had a plan where people could be safe. And we worked closely with the governor's office, and everyone was on the same page that it really did not make sense to risk having any fans in the stadium. So I credit both OSU and U of O for finding creative ways for fans to feel like they get to be in the stadium and still be safe and not in that setting. So yes, I think that is a decision that Oregon has made, along with our local mask mandates and other decisions that we have made for Oregon that have managed to keep us on the lower end of cases in the pandemic. It doesn't mean that we're not being impacted significantly. We absolutely are. But to this point, we have acted in ways that have enabled us to keep our hospitals protected, which is part of what you're seeing in other parts of the country. When things are a free-for-all, that's where you see really tragic impacts as hospitals are overrun.
Thank you for that response, Ms. Gaffney. I kind of threw you a softball on that because it seems that we are ahead of just about every other locality that I see. I'm going to offer two quotes from the president-elect. The first one, and I'm going to paraphrase them both. The first one is "wear your mask." Now, in between the two quotes, I'm going to mention this. Marketing, as you know, is very important to making certain that people understand why they should be wearing masks. We all in this conversation know that people should be wearing masks. Commissioner Sorensen often asks why we don't ordain masks. and you have a response for that each time. But in fact, when people see and hear the reasons that they have to wear a mask, most reasonable people will say, oh, I understand, and begin to wear their masks and begin to follow the other precautions, of course, Ms. Gaffney, that you have just outlined regarding group gatherings. But specifically wearing masks, we know that that is going to be the single largest impactor of the arrested spread of the disease. And if we can induce people to wear their masks, then we need to do it any single way we can. Marketing is the key. And I always speak about something that we talked about at Jerry's for years, and you talk in terms that people understand, which also translates to catch them where they're watching, catch them where they are. If they're watching football games, and they will be, we have an opportunity to say, notice how we are doing it here, and everyone is wearing their mask. Mario Cristobal never lowered his mask once. The only Cuban-American coach in the nation never lowered his mask, nor did any of his staff. But you watch the other games, and they're doing it continually. So grabbing opportunities wherever we can to have people notice the wearing of masks, understanding why they wear masks. I know that that you and the PI team are working diligently on this. But once again, grabbing people where they are, grabbing them, not say, hey, come to us and we have to tell you something, but go to them and tell it to them. And, when hundreds of thousands of people are going to be watching football games, and they will be watching Oregon play Washington State in the Palouse, we'll see how they handle it up in Pullman as far as the wearing of masks. But it's an opportunity to say, this is why you wear a mask. Repeat what the president had to say. Wear your mask. That's a paraphrase. He said it in a lot more words than that. So my final thing is a second quote by the president-elect, and that is, God bless our troops and be with them. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, I can't hear you, Heather. Okay, I can't hear you, Heather, but I'll start going. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, I'll start going. Well, first of all, we can't hear you, Heather. We can't hear you. Cannot hear Heather. Need to hear Heather.
That's correct, Heather. Just to let you know, you're muted.
Want to hear Heather. Crucial to hear Heather. Dying to hear Heather. Can Heather hear us? Yes. Well, how about I do my soliloquy, and then by then you'll figure out how to talk to us. Is that okay? Okay. Well, I just want to thank staff for the information presented today. As you know, I am a critic of our response to this, not in the sense that we haven't done a lot with what we have, and not in the sense that our results have been somehow bad compared to other people. They've been good compared to others. My concern is that the projections by health demographers are poor and getting worse. In Oregon, again, according to the University of Washington Center for Health Metrics, about 670,000 people have died in Oregon as a result of COVID-19. Their projection is, that's as of November 1st. Their projection for December 1st is 800,000. Their projection for January 1st is around 1 million. Around 1,000. And their projection for February 1 is 1,400. So it's going to go up from what was 0 in March to 1.4 thousand people as of February 1. And that is with mandatory masking enforcement. So what we're doing is good.
Test.
But that's good. That's good. What we're doing is good, but let's face it, people are dying from this disease, and government is speaking really in numerous ways. It's true that that having a leader like President-elect Biden, who demonstrates the enforcement of mask wearing, is good. I think we're going to see a lot more aggressive federal action now that we have a leader who is going to be taking this seriously. But on the local level, we really aren't doing the kinds of things. For example, it's great what the state of Oregon did regarding Autzen Stadium. That's really modeling behavior. That's good. But we're still allowing people to get within 6 feet of each other at the airport, many stores, and of course, indoor air quality will become a greater and greater problem as the winter goes ahead. And I just would say that last week, Karen did kind of toss us an opportunity, the board, and that is when I was pressing her on why isn't the public health department, our public health department, recommending requirements and enforceable requirements for masking and social distancing in Lane County, enforceable by a fine like smoking in a closed place like a public building, or enforceable like a motor vehicle infraction. Not enforceable as a crime, but something that does sting if law enforcement does use that authority. And to me, that was good that Karen mentioned, hey, the ball's in your court. If you guys want to do it, if the board wants to do it, they'll implement it. I thought that was very important that she put the frog in our pocket. And if we want to do that, which I think it's time to do, then we ought to be giving direction to staff. And for my 20% of the board, I think we should give that direction. At a minimum, we get the ordinance written. At a minimum, we inform the public that we are moving toward that ordinance, and we want public comment on it. We want to know what the people feel about it. If they don't want it, if they overwhelmingly reject it, and they want to continue on this trajectory of more and more people dying, I guess that's a public choice. But, we also will give an opportunity for those people who want to protect their loved ones and want to protect other people they don't even know from this disease that we know can be beaten back if we were to do more masking and more social distancing. By the way, I'm sorry I can't get my audio to work on my computer, and then it just died completely. So I'm sorry I had to sign off for a while, but I'll yield my time. Thanks.
Commissioner Vosevich, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Thank you. So just a quick note, I'm really thankful for Operation Warp Speed and the announcement this week of a vaccine that has shown 90% effectiveness, and the fact that there's pre-manufacture of doses going on, so the rollout will be quite quick. And in fact, there's an announcement this morning that another drug has gotten emergency use approval that actually stops the spread of the virus into the cells and is out there now for use with folks that aren't hospitalized yet to try and stop the virus from progressing past just minor symptoms if given early after a positive test. So I just want to say that, the first part of the presentation just stresses the need for folks to understand that we're not over this yet. And the thing I want to make sure people understand is where we're not having success right now is in people responding to our contact tracing staff. We're seeing low numbers in ability to get a hold of people and low numbers in ability to track cases back to a known source. And that all has to do with folks responding to those contact tracers. We have to, be good about calling those folks back, giving them, who we've been in contact with. It's not anything that's going to be held against you. You don't, it's not going to, show up on your record somewhere. There's no issues with immigration enforcement tied to contact tracing. It's all about if we can identify folks and get them to isolate, that really has a big impact on stopping community spread. But if folks aren't responding to our contact tracers, that's an issue for us as a public health department and trying to control a contagious disease. And as Commissioner Sorensen's pointed out, it is a disease that's killing people. But we also have to place some of that in perspective as we had 2,000 accidental deaths in Oregon in 2018. Of those, 489 were traffic deaths. We also had 844 suicide deaths, which we're on a pace to outdo this year, and also 530 drug overdose deaths, which are also outpacing right now. And in that same year, there were 573 flu and pneumonia deaths. So kind of place that 1,400 projection in that range. We're still not exceeding our accidental deaths in this state for a normal year. But moving on past that issue of, respond to contact tracing, please. I just want to, one more time mention, Austin's presentation just so stresses the fact that we should have gotten that coronavirus relief funding from the CARES Act directly to the counties. We could have already distributed all of that economic aid. Look what we did with our own money early on. 100% distribution almost immediately. But our state chose to hold that back, even though Portland and Washington County got a lion's share of direct funding and a much higher per capita funding. And, the things we could have been doing with rental assistance, with business assistance, without that red tape and all those things they threw on there, and how slow our ability to react is. If we'd had that money up front in the spring, like Portland got, we'd been already doing a lot of help. So it's disappointing to hear Austin's report and see that we still haven't been able to distribute 100% of that economic aid. And that's just based on the fact that it wasn't given directly down to the counties like it was intended.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a question of my own, and then we can do another round here. I wanted to discuss our recovery clinic on River Road. The number in there now is 30. And I just want to confirm that the allowable space had up to 70 to 75 rooms. Is that correct? Are they all usable?
Thank you, Chair Buck. They are not currently all usable. And we were meeting last week actually to look at capacity. One of the pods hadn't been fully equipped yet, Pod B. So we have equipped that now to expand our capacity. And then there's a fourth quadrant that will be more congregate, if you will. So it's not separate rooms, but we will have that available as surge, again, for people who are already positive, where we're not worried about transmission. That's different than the people there who are quarantining, who really need to be separate. So we are continuing to expand that capacity. I don't know that we'll get all the way to 75, but certainly we're increasing beyond the 30 that we're at right now.
I certainly don't want to see it at max capacity either. I just want to make sure it does have the capacity available and that we're ready to use it should we need to. The other question has to do with the numbers that we're seeing accumulate at the university. And from what I last read, I want to confirm this. And I know that there's more than just university students that are contributing to our positivity rates. But from the last information I was reading about the breakdown of where our positives are coming from, it showed somewhere between 40 and 45% coming from that population. Is that the numbers that you are seeing as well?
Thank you, Chair Buck. That I was looking on my desk for my most recent outbreak summary, but it was right around 40% of the outbreak cases that we had identified were specifically from the University of Oregon. So not every case we have is connected to an outbreak. So there are some truly sporadic cases, but of those cases that are in outbreaks, yes, that was about where our University of Oregon students were, if that answers your question. And certainly I can get up-to-date numbers. I was out yesterday, but I can get up-to-date numbers on that and send that to the board.
My concern is that if a significant amount of the population that's becoming positive is in that younger age range, as we've been typically seeing, but those that are affected, those that we're seeing in ICU, in the hospitals, and those that have been dying from this particular disease are those that are 50 or older. And so there is a disconnect between the generations, and I don't know the best way in order to mend that. Is that what you were seeing as well?
Thank you, Chair Buck. I think we see some of that. And actually the more concerning piece, when I was talking this weekend with our investigators, is starting to see the crossover between those populations. You know, a piece of why I believe we've been able to keep our hospital numbers and death numbers as low as we have is because we've done a really excellent job as a community of protecting that very vulnerable population that's older and in long-term care facilities. But as we start to see our spread go beyond just the college age population, we're seeing more overlap into staff in those care facilities, teachers in schools and daycares. So we're starting to see more widespread diffused disease, and that concerns me in terms of how we're then going to see crossover into other more vulnerable populations.
Those were my questions for the moment. I'll move back to another round, Commissioner Burney and then Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Commissioner Bozovich for that uplifting dissection of death count. I'm being silly. I appreciate why you said that, sir. And then I also want to object a bit to something I heard. I don't think that there's anyone on this board or anyone on this community that does not want to protect the lives and the health of their loved ones. And I just can't accept that to be on one side of an issue means that you care and want to protect your loved ones, and to be on the other side means you don't. I just don't accept that binary presentation of this issue. I want to thank Lane County Public Health for keeping us as safe as you have to this point. It's very clear when you look at the cases across this country, Oregon is in extremely good shape. And as you look at the cases across Oregon, Lane County has been in very good shape. It may be that we're reaching an inflection point in this regard. I don't know. That's why, Karen, I always ask you for your perception of things of that nature. In the presentation, and you have to forgive me, but in that my father was a mechanical engineer, I tend to get into sort of that nitty gritty too. So one, I want to share that I heard Dr. Ludke's KLCC show Friday afternoon at 3:30. And I found it informative and actually entertaining. I mean, it was very interesting to listen to the doctor speak. And I want to reiterate that anyone in our county can call into that show with any specific questions, and you're going to get them answered. And we're all going to learn from your questions. So I encourage that. And I also want to thank you for making that a part of the Lane County response. I think that's important. A comment Commissioner Farr made, made me also think, in that I watched those games as well, that is a strategic location for the PSA announcements that you talked about. I didn't see any during those games. And I cannot imagine that staff at the U of O, the coach of the Ducks, wouldn't mind getting filmed or taking game film, showing them wearing masks. And mask up is the thing. And if we're playing other teams and they're seeing that, I think that would be tremendous for the Lane County message to be seen, not just come to the U of O because we're great, which is good advertising, but also the public health message of Lane County in cooperation with the University of Oregon. And our main message points, why? Because we don't want to close down. And this becomes even more tantamount, it seems to me now, than ever. So those were the points that I wanted to make. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Buck. And Commissioner Burney, that last was brilliant, because whenever they show the goalpost, the sign behind it, right now it's Jerry's, the world sees it, because it really is being spread. And if we can make that a Lane County message regarding Ms. Gaffney, what we are, want everybody to see. So, but that wasn't why I raised my hand, Chair Buck. I just wanted to mention, Ms. Gaffney, that yesterday at the Public Health Advisory Committee meeting, Callie Pierce gave a wonderful summary on our COVID efforts. But then Dr. Warren stepped in and gave some really insightful information to the Public Health Advisory Committee, many of whom are quite influential in the community and spread the word quite a bit in the community. It included protection, masks, etc., but it also included an update on the vaccination situation. So my hat's off. If I had one on, I'd take it off to both Ms. Pierce and to Dr. Warren for the information that they provided to a very influential Public Health Advisory Committee yesterday.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thanks so much. We can often learn a lot from history. And the last time we had a real big worldwide pandemic that really affected the United States in a major way was the 1918 influenza pandemic. And I think it was interesting that during that time, there were different attitudes about how aggressive to be. But as the pandemic wore on, there became an effort to criminalize people who did not want to wear masks. And the phrase mask slacker was used. Mask slacker was a derogatory term of the day for people who would not wear masks, even though there was a crime involved in many communities where they in fact enacted criminal sanctions. And if you look at the History Channel, there's a wonderful picture of a number of women, and one of the signs hung around her neck while she's wearing a mask says, "Wear a mask or go to jail." And that is from the from the period where we had also the city of New York City enforced a requirement to cough or sneeze into handkerchiefs, and they even advised people not to kiss except through a handkerchief. And the city of San Francisco ran in the San Francisco Chronicle a public service announcement telling readers, "The man or woman or child who will not wear a mask now is a dangerous slacker," a reference to the type of World War I slacker who didn't help in the war effort. One sign in California threatened, "Wear a mask or go to jail." So we aren't the first people to have confronted something this major, and maybe we can learn from what happened then. I agree that there could be a technological fix here, i.e. that society can come up with a vaccine and we can figure out how to get it distributed and that it works and it doesn't have more adverse effects than the disease itself. All that would be great, but why not do something in the low-tech environment, which is all they had during the 1918 influenza. Thank you.
Any other comments on this topic? All right, I don't see any. So thank you very much for the update. And we'll move on to the Holiday Farm fire update.
Okay. Hello, Chair Buck. Good morning, Commissioners. Dan Hurley here. I'm Lane County Public Works, and we have a guest with us today, Nadine McCrindle, the Executive Director for the Central and Eastern Oregon chapter of the Red Cross. So we've had some conversations about Red Cross and some of the challenges we've had. We wanted to bring someone from that agency so that you can ask questions directly. And so I'll leave most of my comments on that front to Nadine. The big news on the fire recovery is that we have a new website. It's mackenzierebuilds.org that went live at the end of last week. Devin Ashford did a great job putting that together to consolidate our information and make it very easy to navigate and very clear for people. So we're trying to promote that this week and make sure that people have that as an ongoing resource. We are continuing to do outreach to folks on various fronts on this recovery. One correction in the board materials that you have there today, we are moving our Facebook Live events to every other Thursday. We won't have one this week, so that's incorrect in the notes there. And we'll get that information on our website as well. On the social services recovery, we're continuing to work upriver. We have Lucy Zamorelli up there at least a couple days a week. And the community up there is starting to shift to the longer term recovery effort. There's a long-term recovery group that has been stood up. They had a good meeting last night and starting to talk about some of those longer term things like rebuilding the library. Laurel O'Rourke is continuing to do casework for folks who are displaced and in the hotels where folks are being sheltered by Red Cross. And she's now our lead for, it's called the MAST, multi-agency shelter transition team that's coordinating between Red Cross, DHS, and FEMA. Austin gave a good summary of the different projects we're looking at for housing, disaster, transitional sheltering. And so I'll kind of skip over that. We did have a good meeting with FEMA yesterday to find out more about how the analysis works to decide whether we have a direct housing mission or not. They estimate that there are about 77, I believe it was, households that are eligible for a direct housing mission. And of that, they estimate that about 30% or about 23 households would take advantage of that. Looking at available rental units, they had initially assessed that it looks like there's adequate supply for that. But we had some good conversations talking about the realities of the tight rental market here. On the debris management effort, the phase 1 hazardous waste cleanup is moving along very well. We have 4 teams from EPA that are working through that. They've cleaned up 334 properties at this point, with only 43 remaining. And we don't have a timeline yet for that second phase for the large debris and ash cleanup. But we do have 499 properties that have right of entry forms submitted. We're continuing to try to do outreach to remaining properties. We have about 50 that are on a list that were noted as high priority by eWeb. And we're doing outreach, but having difficulty with a lot of those not having accurate contact information. eWeb's doing terrific work up there with various partners, including the Northwest Youth Corps. There's a good article in the paper today, a front page article that talks about that work, and we'll continue to coordinate with them. And I know we're short on time, so I'll probably wrap up there and pass to Nadine. Hopefully she's on the line here. We very much appreciate the work that Red Cross is doing. They've sheltered hundreds of people and continue to shelter hundreds. I don't have good numbers on that, and maybe Nadine can provide that. But we did go through a consolidation effort over the weekend to reduce the number of hotels. They had been in about 12, and I think we're down to maybe 5 now. But Nadine, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, everyone.
All right, I'll pass to you now. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Dan. Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Nadine McCrindle. I'm the Executive Director for Central and Eastern Oregon for the American Red Cross. I'm here today replacing, or standing in rather, for Dale Kuntz, who unfortunately had an unexpected trip come up that he couldn't pass. So it's actually a bit of an honour actually to be speaking with you this morning. When the fire started, Lane County was the first place that I was sent to. My home base is Bend, Oregon. I spent one day at the temporary evacuation point here in Redmond, and then I was sent over to Eugene to help out at Thurston with our evacuation point over there. So when I was asked to speak to you all this morning, it was something that I was actually looking forward to. So thank you for having me. I can provide some numbers in terms of the number of people that we're taking care of at the moment. We have 230 clients across 6 hotels across Eugene and Springfield. For the past few weeks, we have been working through what we call shelter resident transition. And what this process is sitting down with each of the clients. Actually, no, we don't sit down with them because it's COVID. We talk to our clients and we find out what it is that is kind of barriers to these people from being able to leave the hotel and be able to either find more permanent housing or more short-term solution for them to be able to continue moving on in their recovery. So that has been happening, like I mentioned, for about the past 3 weeks. And all of that has been in preparation for setting up the multi-agency shelter transition team, which is when we then work with a wider group of community partners and agencies to really find out what those longer term or higher barriers that there are for people to be able to continue with their recovery process. We have had people staying in hotels now for we're coming into 3 months now, and likely will continue through the holidays. And hotels, whilst they're lovely in the first week and it might feel like a bit like a vacation, it's not a home. And our goal is really to try and find new homes for these people so that they can start rebuilding their life and what that's going to look like. All of the people that we have in our care at the moment are people who have suffered either a complete loss of their home or that their home is at a point where they're unable to live in it. So major damage and destroyed are the clients that we have and that we're taking care of at the moment. I will say also that while we are taking care of people in hotel rooms, of course, due to COVID and trying to keep people safe, the feeding of that population is being taken care of by the state. That was transitioned over coming on a month ago now. But we also have available disaster mental health, disaster healthcare, and our disability integration team are still on the ground and are taking care of folks that have those needs, and we're taking care of them. MAST is a process that will be set up probably in the coming weeks. And as the gentleman mentioned before, Laurel has been leading that for Lane County. And Lane County, in the few meetings that I sat on for MAST, Laurel has been very, very vocal in saying that Lane County wants to be part of those early groups that start to do that. So the appetite for this program is very strong, which is really great to see for the county, because the sooner that we can get people connected to resources, the sooner they get to keep moving again. We've seen great success with MAST in other large disasters across the country, and so we're really motivated to have this program stood up here and get people access to resources that they need. The idea of it, of MAST, is that each client gets to sit down once and tell their story about what they need, instead of being shopped around to all the different agencies. It makes it a lot less of a traumatic experience for folks. Telling your story over and over and over again is reliving that trauma, and what we're trying to do with MAST is make it so that the clients can just tell that story once. And then at the end of that meeting, or interview rather, all of the agencies then are able to very, very quickly ascertain what these clients qualify for and to connect them to those resources and try and get it into their hands as quickly as possible. I do also want to kind of talk to the community support that we have received throughout this operation. Local volunteers have stood up and have deployed. That's the word that we use in Red Cross, we deploy to disasters. And I will say, for someone who lives in Bend and just went across the Cascades, this was an incredibly emotional deployment for me to see Oregonians going through what they are. But I will tell you that for people who live in Eugene and in Lane County and stood up and said, I want to help my own neighbours, is an even more emotional experience for those volunteers. And I will say that they have continued to stand up again and again and again to help people. And it has been probably one of the most, not probably, it has been one of the most heartwarming experiences that I have had in terms of serving with the Red Cross and helping people in disasters. And so you have a really special community there. And so I wanted to acknowledge that and congratulate you all for building and fostering such a community full of people that care and want to help. With that, I will stop and I'll take any questions. Thank you again for your time today and letting me join this meeting.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on this item? I'll just add that I know that it has been quite a struggle for Red Cross to navigate response in the era of COVID. Mm-hmm. It's my understanding that your experience is more in congregate care, and this is the big foray into disaster recovery into non-congregate care, meaning putting people in hospital or motels and hotels. And that has been a significant challenge in the response for the Holiday Farm fire. I was hoping to hear from Dale today. We have had to correspond on some significant challenges of communication between the county and Red Cross. And oftentimes things that are discussed at the state level don't get all the way down to the county level. Mm-hmm. And we've been presented with, letters from fire evacuees on having to move suddenly multiple times. And we are hoping, and I have been discussing with Dale, a better way to have communication so that we understand what's coming from Red Cross in advance of being notified from a fire victim with a letter that's been slipped under their hotel door that they have to be out in just a few days. It requires the onus to be on the fire victim or the county as a facilitator in order to rectify the situation so their housing remains. And in the future, it would be better if there was a different way to organize that communication structure. I appreciate very much what the Red Cross has been doing to shelter so many people who so needed it in dire traumatic circumstances. And I don't want to downplay that in any way. But there have been equal challenges and frustrations on the way in which it occurred. And we need to rectify that situation as soon as possible. My understanding is that people will be out or need to be out of their hotels and motels by the end of this year. And so I want to clarify if that is still true because we have a significant challenge in housing those people after that date.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chair, but would you like me to address your questions first before? moving
Yeah,
to.
That would
Okay.
be great. And then I'll move
Thank
on to
you.
Commissioner Bernie.
Yes, look, I will absolutely own that sheltering people in a COVID environment and finding hotel rooms is something that the Red Cross is doing for the first time. As an organisation who has historically set up shelters in a moment's notice in gymnasiums and churches and convention centres, you know, and done it for years and years and years, and we're very, very experienced at it. And this year has really brought on some challenges. Having trouble finding hotel room availability during this disaster was probably a disaster in itself, in terms of both in the fact that we don't have the years and years of experience of knowing that it was, but even just facing a disaster, hotel room inventory being at a premium as it is. So that has been a very frustrating experience for, I think, all of those involved in that process. And so I will acknowledge that. The communication that went to clients as well for changes, we have learned from that experience and know that whilst our intentions are always good, I think there must be, there are not bigger hearts than the people that volunteer and work for the Red Cross. And so our intention is never to bring harm to people. But I understand that when people are going through these disasters, that, you know, sudden changes in direction can be quite stressful. And we have learned from that experience as well. And it's not our intention to continue doing that. In addressing the end of year deadline, we are under contract until the end of the year, December 31st, and that is with the state. And if the need continues beyond December 31st, then those discussions happen with the state to extend that. Red Cross doesn't put a closed sign on the door and tell people good luck, goodbye. Our intention is to make sure that there is a transition plan for every single person and that they're able to transition to that. And that is in continuing with our sheltering process that we have, whether they're in a hotel room or in a convention centre. And so whilst I know that the date exists, but it certainly doesn't say that Red Cross is leaving town on December 31st. And so I want to be able to reassure you of that.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernie.
Thank you. I'm juggling between listening to this and the 50 cancellations I'm receiving as we have this meeting. First off, all of Chair Buck's concerns notwithstanding, it's a pleasure to see you, Nadine. I want this board to know that Nadine, at the very early stages, was coordinating with me consistently, and there was only one topic, and that was the topic to take care of people as best the Red Cross could. So the county hasn't been perfect, the state hasn't been perfect, Red Cross hasn't been perfect, but one thing that has been perfect, I believe, is the intent to try and help people mitigate misery and suffering during this horrific disaster. So it's lovely to meet you. And that's really what I wanted to say. Issues remain, they're gonna need to be ironed out, but it's good to have you speaking for myself, it's wonderful to have you as a partner. And it's wonderful to get the feedback on the kind of community that we live in, because we live here. We take that for granted. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Buck. A couple of things, Nadine. First off, thank you for the confirmation that Laurel O'Rourke is continuing to be extremely effective in her work. No surprise, but it's wonderful to hear it from your mouth.
Yeah.
And thank you for your involvement and this message to Lane County today. Significantly, I gleaned something from your presentation. And other commissioners have talked about your general presentation, but you mentioned that it's an unusual experience, in fact, a first, for the Red Cross to be organizing hotel rooms as opposed to congregate shelters in gymnasiums, etc. And I found that interesting, but not surprising, because of the very localized nature of this type of an emergency, where the emergency is adjacent to a relatively large metropolitan area that's unaffected by the emergency. So it is the resource with actual spaces for people to stay, as opposed to finding congregate shelters as an alternative. Of course, we have COVID that reduces the use of congregate shelters.
Yeah.
But what it really underscores to me, Nadine, is that the fact that we are all forced into training that we otherwise would not participate in by emergencies. And it gives us an opportunity to learn to do something that we would otherwise not have trained to do. And I would guess that next time Red Cross has such an emergency, they'll know exactly how to handle hotel rooms. That, some of the things that Chair Buck pointed out, such as sliding notes on the door saying you're out in 3 days, you learn from the novel experience. And you can comment on that if you want. But really, in fact, I trust the Red Cross incredibly, from all of my years of very peripheral experience with you, that the Red Cross is really effective in what they do, and that they learn from the new experiences. So once again, thank you very much for this presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Commissioner Farr. Yes, we in the past, when we just to comment just very, very briefly, but just to kind of set the scene a little bit, when we open shelters in congregate settings, so in convention centres and gymnasiums, we build relationships with these clients. We have breakfast with them, we have lunch with them, we have dinner, we share stories, and it becomes a community. And I tell you, it has been hard. The clients don't know how different it is, but for our volunteers, the difference is marked. And for a community like for Red Cross volunteers that talk and hug and talk and hug and make sure that everybody is okay, this has been a very different experience. And despite our best efforts to provide as much training as we can, you really don't know how to do something until you do it. And so we have learned an incredible amount of from this experience. And going forward for other disasters that are happening across the country, they're calling on us to say, Oregon, what's your experience? Which is so ironic, because usually we're not the people that they come and ask for experience, because we don't have disasters of this scale. And so, yeah, it really has been a very educational experience, and knowing that COVID's not going away and disasters will continue to happen, and our contribution and learnings hopefully make it an even better experience for clients going forward.
Thank you once again, Nadine. And I would guess, as an aside, that your accent is from about 12,000 miles away from my Yorkshire accent.
Australia. We're both a long way from home.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you. I really appreciate your presentation today, and of course all the great work of the American Red Cross here and all the way back to its founding. I have some questions about sort of on a generic level, is that what could you describe as the relationship between the Red Cross, FEMA, and the local community in a disaster like the Holiday Farm fire? Who does what?
What is what? So could you be a bit more specific about what you would like to know?
Yeah, obviously it's the local fire authority that helps put the fire out, and the Oregon Department of Forestry helps put the fire out, and you don't put the fire out. And then from there, by analogy, could you explain in general what American Red Cross does as opposed to FEMA and local governments, and if there are other cooperators?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification there. So the Red Cross, our mission is to prevent and alleviate human suffering during disasters. And so our responsibility, if you will, in the community when disasters happen is focused around providing emergency shelter, emergency feeding, and reunification efforts. They're the three main mandates that we are responsible for. When emergency services calls us and says we need your help because of a fire like the Holiday Farm fire, they're the three main things that we provide. Now, in terms of how we work with FEMA, just as I am sitting here and talking with you as at a county level with commissioners, we have representatives of Red Cross sitting with FEMA. We have representatives sitting with the state and also corresponding with emergency services. In fact, the last 3 weeks prior to me going back to my normal role last week, I sat in the state ECC, or State Emergency Command Centre, and worked alongside FEMA and also the state emergency folks in making sure that we were all being very, very open with our communication and what the needs were in the communities. Likewise, the states were very, very vocal, and we worked very closely to find out what the needs were in the counties, so that at a state, FEMA and Red Cross level, we could better coordinate our efforts to make sure that people's needs were being met. Does that answer your question?
Yes. How much money does the Red Cross expect to spend on its efforts on behalf of the victims of the Holiday Farm fire?
Millions. We have and I shouldn't laugh after that, but I go back to it being that Oregon and what we are experiencing now is a historical level disaster relief effort. We have what's called different levels of disaster responses. It starts at a 1, which is a home fire in an individual household, and it goes up to what is called a level 7. And you reach level 7 when your field operating budget is expected to exceed $10 million. I was told that we exceeded that in the first week of this disaster operation. And so we are...
So we were at level 7 in 1 week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the final numbers, I don't know what those numbers will be, but I know that it exceeds $10 million.
And then where do you get your money? Where does this $10 million come from?
It comes from the American people.
Okay.
People donate to the American Red Cross. Oregonians were incredibly generous. We received an outpouring of donated funds during the operation. And people and corporations support the Red Cross and the work that we do year round. As we're now coming into the holiday season, that is when we also see a lot of people wanting to give to the Red Cross, especially during years where there are a number of large-scale disasters, such as the country has experienced in California, Louisiana, and Texas, and continuing
How do you distinguish between, let's say, the victims of a fire who are made homeless by the experience of the fire, and let's say what I would call routine homelessness that we see on the streets of Eugene and Springfield? In other words, are you helping those people? And if not, what is the distinction in your decision to help homeless people that are homeless because of a fire, either a small fire in their house, which is a big fire to them personally, but not a big fire to society, or a giant forest fire that it kills people and devastates hundreds of homes and upends the lives of all those people that you're helping? In the meantime, we've got a whole bunch of homeless people in Eugene and Springfield. And are you helping them? Is that part of your mission as well?
The longer term care of the homeless population is not covered by the mission of the Red Cross. We haven't the resources or the capabilities to be able to support that in an ongoing basis. I will say, though, that anyone who experiences a disaster is eligible for Red Cross assistance. And that is that if an individual's home burns down, or if there is an emergency to the scale of the Holiday Farm fire, the Red Cross is there to help people who experience those disasters. And we have what is called honouring the donor dollar. And so what we do is we know that people donate to the Red Cross because they know that we're helping people who are facing emergencies. And we ensure that the work that we do is honouring the intent of the people that donate to the Red Cross. For people that are in our care, I'm sorry.
Just finish your sentence. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
Oh, for the people that are in our care right now in Lane County because of the Holiday Farm fire, all that we ask for is for proof of address. And if we could verify that that address was destroyed by the fire, then they are under the care of American Red Cross until such time as they find an alternative place to live.
And that was my kind of last question is, for the victims of the fire, and thanks for distinguishing between the victims of a fire and, let's say, general homelessness. For the homeless people that are victims of the fire that you're helping, you stop helping those victims. In other words, is there a period of time that you allocate to help the victims of the fire? And if they're still homeless after 3 years, let's say, are they still eligible for Red Cross assistance to live in a motel, have food provided to them? Is there a point in time at which you say, well, you were homeless because of the fire, when shortly after the fire or even during the fire, but now 3 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, you're not a victim of the fire at that point? Can you describe that process of the disengagement from the community when the bad thing has happened?
Yes, I can speak to that. So the program that I mentioned earlier, the MAST, Multi-Agency Shelter Transition Team, included in that team is the Department of Housing Services. And so our hope is that for people who were homeless during the fire but were in the fire area, is that they get introduced to resources to be able to start fresh again. And the purpose of that team is to help people get access to all of the resources that they determine that they need to be able to move forward with their recovery process. And so during that process, people evaluate and are given access to those resources, and plans are put in place for their movement.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry I'm having trouble with the audio on my computer, but my phone audio is working, so thanks very much.
My pleasure. I can hear you loud and clear. You're all set.
Any other comments or questions? If none, I just want to end on a request, which is we are facing a November 16th deadline for individual assistance for folks. And what is presenting a significant hurdle for housing is that we are unable to get much information, any information, from the Red Cross database. And I do understand that there is some work that's trying to be negotiated at the state level in order to transfer some information, but the forms in which folks were working on with you, we feel really needs to be updated in order to facilitate better information flow, because the people you have in your database may or may not be the people in our database, and we are not able to cross-reference. And if they are needing to move out of Red Cross housing, we don't have a way to contact them if they're not also in our database. We would really like to see some changes in how that is managed. We are working on information flow from FEMA's database to the county database, but you have a significant amount of people that probably fall into low income category or uninsured category that we don't have information for, and we really want to help these people.
I understand.
So if you could take that back, that would be much appreciated.
Yes, absolutely, Chair Buck. And I will say that when MAST is set up, that information sharing will happen. And the intention of that, and one of the wonderful outcomes of setting up MAST is that there is a much higher level sharing of information across all agencies. And so just as soon as we can get that program up and running, you'll see an increased sharing of that information, and to make sure that people get access to all of those resources. I agree with you, is that we are taking care of the most vulnerable members of the population that have been affected by this disaster. And we want to see them get access to those resources just as much as you do. And so that's just as soon as we can get MAST up and running, that sharing of information is part of that process. And so you'll see a change there for sure.
Thank you very much. And thank you for coming to speak with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. I'll leave you for now. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.
Okay, well, we will move on to our consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Burney, second by Commissioner Sorensen. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we will move on to item 7, which I will read and then have a statement. So item 7 under Health and Human Services is Order Order 20-11-10-03 in the matter of making a sole source determination for selection of St. Vincent de Paul of Lane County to provide homeless singles access center services and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the determination and contract with the sole source provider. And with us will be Ms. Gaffney. At this point in time, I will state a conflict of interest. I am related to the executive director of St. Vincent de Paul. And so I will transfer the proverbial gavel over to Vice Chair Burney, and I will mute and remove my video and come back when this item is complete. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm cognizant that we have a 10:30 time certain, so I'm going to do this as quickly as possible. Is there, Karen, discussion as it relates to Order 20-11-10-03?
Thank you, Vice Chair Burney. This item would typically be on our consent calendar as a routine item, but because it's St. Vincent de Paul, we've pulled it off there. This is fairly routine, and in the packet, it describes the measures we've already taken to determine that why we recommend they're a sole source to provide this service.
Discussion. Commissioner Bozovic.
I was going to move approval of the order.
Second.
Commissioner Bozovic moving approval, Commissioner Farr silently seconding, Commissioner Sorensen loudly seconding. Is there further discussion of the motion? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries 4-0. Commissioner Buck recused. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I know we're a little behind today, but we are moving on to our time certain under item 8, a public work session, update of the City of Eugene Urban Reserves Planning Project. And with us is, I believe, Lindsay Eichner, our interim principal planner.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I am going to share my screen. See if we can make sure you see the right one. I think that should work. Let's get it up. Where'd my mouse go? All right. My mouse has disappeared. My apologies.
Okay, we've been having some tech challenges today.
Okay. Gonna try to do it again. Just gonna show this monitor. Okay. Are you seeing a single screen of urban reserves?
Yes, we see that.
Okay. All right. Well, good morning. Normally I'm saying good afternoon, but thank you for having me this morning. Today, we are going to I'm going to introduce our project management team that's on the phone with us today. So we have Rebecca Gershow from the City of Eugene. We also have Alyssa Hansen, the Eugene Planning Director. We have Amber Bell, the Lane County Planning Director, Terry Harding from the city, Emily Jerome from the city, Heather O'Donnell from the city, Thea Evans from the city, and Sophie McGinley from the city. It's the majority of our project management team. So we are all available for questions when we get to that point. Today, Rebecca will briefly touch on the 4 urban reserves options under consideration, and I will review the recommendations by the 2 planning commissions and direction by city councils that city staff have received since the last time we've met. And I'll also go over the motions to consider today. As you know, we are seeking your direction on a preferred urban reserves option today. Following an agreed upon urban reserves option, both bodies, the city council and the board, staff will begin working on the formal adoption process in order to hold public hearings in 2021. So I will hand the presentation over to Rebecca.
Thank you, Lindsay. Can everyone hear me? Great. Thanks for having me today. Chair Buck, commissioners, my name is Rebecca Gershow. I'm a senior planner at the city and the project manager on the Urban Reserves project. I appreciate you all taking the time today. I have the job of running through the options again that we have put out for review and for your consideration, and then I'm going to hand it back over to Lindsay. So as we've included in your materials, I'm going to share the following 4 maps, and they highlight the areas proposed for possible urban reserves in green and the areas removed from consideration in red. I'm only going to review the highlights of each option, not all of the bullet points on all of the slides. So option 1 is the maximum size allowed by law. It includes enough land to meet approximately 30 years of growth beyond 2032. While it meets the community's growth needs for the longest time, it also uses the most resource land of all the options. So next slide, please. Option 2 includes enough land to meet approximately 29 years of growth beyond 2032. Its defining feature is that it excludes from urban reserves consideration all Class 1 land, which is our highest value agricultural soils. Those Class 1 soils are shown in the red area here, primarily between river and prairie roads. Next slide. Option 3 includes enough land to meet approximately 27 years of growth beyond 2032. You can see the red area on both sides of Prairie Road has grown as all agricultural properties with predominant Class 1 and adjacent Class 2 land, our highest value soils, have been removed from consideration for this option. The next slide is our 4th option. This is enough land to meet approximately 10 years of growth beyond 2032. It's the smallest size allowed by law. All but the lowest value resource land has been excluded from consideration for this option. That's shown in red, the excluded land, scattered throughout the remaining green urban reserve area. Next slide. This slide focuses on the only area that's different in the first 3 options. It focuses in on the acreage of the land being excluded from urban reserves, the type of land being excluded, and the overall urban reserve acreage for each option. There's only a 425 acre difference between option 1 and option 3, which there's been the most discussion about. So I wanted to highlight those. Option 3, as I said, removes all of the Class 1 and adjacent Class 2 land, which still leaves almost 6,000 acres set aside for urban reserves. This next slide, there we go, is the final slide of the options that I'm going to share. It is this comparison chart, which is in your packet. We've included it again for reference if you would like to review more data on each option. It includes the developable land that's included in each option, the type of land that's removed, those types of things. So now with that brief overview, I'm going to hand it back over to Lindsay.
So thank you, Rebecca. So on August 17th of this year, the Eugene Planning Commission unanimously recommended to the City Council support of option 3, the 27-year option. In their deliberations, they identified the Technical Advisory Committee, which is called ETAC for short, their recommendation to staff and the public input received as important considerations. They expressed that the 27-year option was long enough time frame to allow for growth and flexibility, and it preserved high-value farmland. On August 18th, the Lane County Planning Commission voted 5-3 to recommend to the Board of Commissioners the 30-year option with a plan policy requiring that the Class 1 and 2 farmland in the Aubrey subarea be the last of the urban reserve land to be considered for expansion of Eugene's urban growth boundary. Some of the Planning Commission members expressed support for the largest urban reserve area to best support the future growth of the city of Eugene. Some members of the Planning Commission also expressed concern in not protecting the Class 1 and 2 soils in the Aubrey sub area. So this was a good compromise for the majority of the Lane County Planning Commissioners. To illustrate these recommendations, the differences between the two planning commissions, on the right is option 3, the 27-year option, which the Eugene Planning Commission endorsed. And on the left is the Lane County Planning Commission recommendation, where you can see the diagonal green lines showing the additional land that would be included in urban reserves, but considered last for inclusion in the UGB. While it appears possible to adopt a policy for this development of including these Class 1 and 2 soils last into the urban growth boundary, the outcome becomes unclear, as this is the first time something like this has been proposed that we know of in the state. So it's unclear if this option was challenged upon appeal of the urban reserves project, if it would be defensible, and it's also unclear where exactly it would live in the comprehensive plan. So the City Council, when they last met, directed city staff to initiate a public review and in the adoption process, including but not limited to comprehensive plan and code amendments, to consider establishment of urban reserves as described in option 3, the 27-year option. This direction was based on the unanimous recommendation of the Eugene Planning Commission, support of the Envision Eugene Technical Advisory Committee's recommendation to staff, and consistent with public input received. In your packet that I prepared, we included 17 letters that were received from the public. But as you know, additional comments came in yesterday and today, and I have not had a chance to put that together to post on our website, but I believe that you as county commissioners were copied on most of those comments, and I'm happy to discuss them with you. Moving this option forward is very dependent on the board's discussion today. So before you today, there's the 4 options that the project management team has prepared. There's a 5th option for a motion that is the Planning Commission's recommendation. Did Commissioner Farr, did you want to ask a question?
Not until after the presentation. Thank you, Lindsay. I'm just trying to signal Commissioner Buck to get me in the queue.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so these are the 5 options we have prepared. If you happen to choose through your deliberations a different option than City Council, we've included language in the suggested motions that include a recommendation for the board chair. And I apologize, I did specifically call out Chair Buck, but I do acknowledge that there could be a change in chair in January. And so I do want to just change. I would prefer if it would just specifically say the chair versus Chair Buck, if that is to be changed. To work with a city designee to figure out the agreement of the process of how the board and City Council could come to an agreement. So I wanted to clarify that. We're not asking that the board chair and the city designee determine what the actual option moving forward would be, but that they coordinate together to determine the process, which will likely entail additional meetings between the full board and City Council. This path is certainly possible, but we do want to be clear that it could delay or will delay the adoption phase of the project to an uncertain degree. And that is the end of our presentation for today. And we thank you for your time, and we are here for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Commissioner Farr first.
Thank you, Chair Buck. And I maybe a question, but more of a simple statement. You know, Chair Buck, and to the board and presenters, last Tuesday and on multiple other occasions, this Board of County Commissioners acknowledged the unacceptable shortage we are experiencing in housing at all levels in this community. It wasn't the first time we've talked about it. It's not going to be the last. So my comment / question is this: in the event that the population projections that are being used to present us with these urban reserve options are found to be grossly incorrect, and I contend that they will be found grossly incorrect subsequent to now, will future commissions and councils have an opportunity to correct the inadequacies that may arise based on whatever decision we and the City Council make at this juncture? If you want to, just a very quick response to that would be wonderful. That could be a yes, no. Will future commissions, councils have a chance to correct whatever inadequacies or incorrectness?
Do you want me to?
Yeah, I heard the answer.
That, Lindsay?
So good. I've asked that question before, and the answer is, and I'm copying Commissioner Sorensen a little bit here. I'm not an attorney, but I love to know the answer when I ask the question. The answer is yes. Future commissions will be able to correct whatever incorrect information produces the result of today's discussion. So that being said, you know, in the future, whatever we do today, we can expect that future city councils and county commissions will be revisiting this based upon the fact that we are going to experience climate refugee, whatever anyone may say about that. We are going to experience thousands of young people graduating from our high schools locally every single year who also require housing. And that we just simply don't know how many people would like to live inside the city of Eugene's city limits, or the city of Springfield and the smaller communities in Lane County. You know, there's going to be an incredible pressure. There is already incredible pressure to add housing. There's already incredible pressure to reduce the cost of housing as it compares to the median incomes, the incomes that we experience in our predominantly service environment in Lane County. So that being said, there's not much more I can say about it. Whatever decision we make today, it's going to be revisited. So I'll be looking to that revisiting. I don't know how many years from now. That also being said, I would, if I were to vote on this, I'd vote on option 1 with the Lane County Planning Commission's recommendation that we do a hierarchical approach to it, so which would actually be option 5. I'm going to wait for the motions on that, and I'll vote yes or no on the motion. The other thing I will suggest, Lindsay, is that you singled out Chair Buck and you corrected that to the chair of the board. I would probably say I'd be comfortable with the chair and or vice chair of the board. That being said, you'll probably not hear me say anything else regarding this other than yes or no based on the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. We need your audio, Commissioner.
Okay, can you hear me now? Good. All right. Thank you very much for the presentation. I just had a few questions for Ms. Eichner. First of all, just to understand the options. As I understand it, the option 1 is the largest one. That's the 30-year projection. And option 3 is the 27-year projection. Is that correct so far? Okay, good.
Yes.
And that the city is city council is advancing the option 3, the 27-year proposal. I'm a little unclear which option the county has been discussing most intently.
So we have not provided you a staff recommendation. So,
but I mean, what is option 1? I thought option 1 was the 30-year.
Option 1 was the 30-year. Before we brought options to the city council and the board, when we received original direction on working on this project, the one of the items that was provided was a request that staff bring a 30-year option, but it wasn't necessarily direction to support that option, but to bring it for consideration. And so that's what we've provided today.
Was there a county planning commission option that was separate from the 30-year option? And if so, what was the length of time on that option and the number of that option?
Yes, there was. So the Lane County Planning Commission recommended the 30-year option, but with an additional policy added that directed that the class 1 and 2 soils up in what we're calling the Aubrey sub area north of River Road and Aubrey Lane, or west of River Road and north of Aubrey Lane area, that those be brought into the Eugene urban growth boundary last, after all of the other urban reserve area was brought into the city.
And so it's different from option 1.
It is. It has additional policy guidance.
And what is the downside from your perspective of the including that Aubrey sub area as part of the area that could be developed if that option is it a legal issue involving the Land Conservation and Development Commission or state rules?
You want me to jump in on that, Lindsay?
Sure.
So the Lane County Planning Commission recommendation is very similar. Do you want to show that slide, side by side slide that you have? It's very similar to the 27-year option, except instead of removing the land in the Aubrey sub area that has the class 1 and class 2 soils, that's what you see on the right side. It's removed from consideration as urban reserve land. The County Planning Commission recommendation has kept it in with a plan policy recommendation saying it should be the last land considered when we are expanding the urban growth boundary. So it's still included in urban reserves with directing staff to write a plan policy to consider it last. And so the tricky part is that we've never done that before. And to our knowledge, no one in the state has done that in terms of urban reserves. So it's unproven as to how it could be implemented and how it could potentially be challenged. Those are the questions.
Okay, thank you. One last question for Ms. Eichner, and then I do want to make a motion. Ms. Eichner, regardless of which option we pick, Eugene and Springfield pick, Eugene and Lane County pick, regardless of which option we advance, assuming the city and the county could agree on advancing that option, it doesn't really affect the public's rights to testify on how they want this to go. And in the public hearing process, once we agree to advance a particular idea, is that correct?
Yes, the public will have multiple opportunities to provide comments at both the Planning Commission and the Board and City Council process.
Yeah. I'd like to make a motion to advance option 1 and direct staff to work towards that goal and facilitate future interactions with the city of Eugene.
Just to be clear, we haven't had the rest of the commissioners speak, but
well, we should allow the maker of the motion, in my view, and the second an opportunity to address the motion, and the entire board should have an opportunity to address the motion or anything else before a vote is taken.
Okay, so you have moved option 1, which is the 30-year option. Just to be clear, that's correct, right?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I did.
Commissioner Farr seconded it.
Okay, so we have a motion for option 1 from Commissioner Sorensen, seconded by Commissioner Farr. Commissioner Bozovich for discussion.
Just before I get into discussion, request for clarification, is that option 1 as the Planning Commission put it forward with the qualification on the soils being last developed, or is that just option 1 as it was originally presented?
It's option 1, the 30-year without the qualification, and the also it's a direction to staff to facilitate that, because it's understanding that that's going to require more discussion with the city of Eugene before it can be jointly adopted by the city and the county.
And I may suggest it friendly at some point, Chair, Mr. Bozovich.
Okay, thank you. I'm kind of happy it did leave out the qualification, because I think that is problematic in it doesn't follow state law and would be very difficult to write into code and provide findings around. So staff is probably happy about that. I had a bunch of questions, which I'm going to ask now, because I think they may change people's opinion about adopting option 1 or not. That my choice would be to go there partly because that last 425 acres has a density of over 8 units, almost 9 units per acre, where if we back up to option 3, we're talking about, a density of about 4.85. So that is providing the highest density capability lands for development in our area. But my concern is this process is purely talked about residential lands and needed housing. My question is this urban reserve designation place a residential overlay on these properties, or can they be developed also as employment lands? Because this is overlaying areas that are where there's a transload facility being built along the railroad tracks there next to Green Hill Road, and is showing it as residential. And that's one of the things it seems that is not included in all this, is there's nothing about employment lands that has been discussed, and the need for employment lands over the next 50 years and how that's going to eat into that inventory that we're identifying right now. So if somebody wants to address that.
You want me to jump in, Lindsay? So that's a great question. Sorry, I'm echoing. Can you hear me okay? We did look at employment lands. We looked at industrial land capacity. Let me try to, how about now? Okay, good. So the residential capacity assumptions that we're talking about are just to look at for comparison purposes, with the assumption that we could build residential housing across all of the land, which we know that wouldn't really happen. So we did do capacity assumptions for industrial land based on the same assumptions we used for our UGB analysis, to make sure that we had enough land in urban reserves potentially for industrial uses in the future, which we do. Knowing that with urban reserves, there's no designation on there. So it's not until we would have a need for expansion and know what type of land we need to bring in into the UGB, then we would analyze the type of land by the type of need. So that's purely for analysis purposes. That was a good clarification.
Thank you. That's an excellent clarification. I just wanted to make sure that folks knew that we weren't designating all this land as residential at this time, and that the owners of that transload facility are a lot less nervous probably now that they're not going to be rezoned to residential, because that could be a critical facility for our coastal economy on the Coos Bay rail line there. So knowing that and understanding that, we're actually not talking about a full 30 years of residential, because some of that will get used up for employment lands and industrial, commercial, whatever lands there. So we're not truly talking about, quote, the 50-year / 30-year horizon beyond the UGB. It's actually less than that, which is one of the reasons why I was pushing all along for the maximum urban reserve. But having understood what City Council came to with the option 3, and seeing testimony that wanted us to go even further to exclude class 3 and 4 soils, which brought us down to option 4, I would encourage the board to think about the possibility of adopting option 3, knowing that in the future we can, as Commissioner Farr pointed out, future boards can come back and add additional area. I just feel for speed of getting to an actual adopted urban reserve, if we adopt something different from what the city did, we're going to be another 6 months rectifying the difference between what we adopt and the city adopts, and it won't serve us. You know, it took a long time to finish the Envision Eugene process and complete the separation of the UG Breeze between Springfield and Eugene. All of that's been a really long process. So I would, you know, as much as I want to support option one, I would encourage the board to vote this motion down and adopt option three, so we can get to yes in the fastest possible way.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Commissioner Burney.
Do you hear an echo? No, good, okay. Well, that's interesting. I actually believe the following. I believe that I agree with Commissioner Bozovich. In the interest of good government and efficiency, we ought, and I don't know, but I'm guessing that if there was disagreement at this moment between the city of Eugene and the Council of Lane, it would create additional staff time and additional planning meetings. So I agree that I will vote this motion down, and I will look at number three also. But here's one of the reasons why, and I can say that with a pretty, clear conscience. We're talking about a plan that is projected to get us to the year 2059 under the option three, and the year 2062, if my math is correct, under the 30-year plan. We don't have a frickin' clue what the demand, what the cost for housing, what the people coming here. So if this motion is voted down, the motion that I would want to see would relate to not just pointing out that future city councils and board of commissioners can revisit, but to say this shall be revisited within a certain period of time, whether that's 10 years or 12 years, but within a certain period of time, so that we can hone in, because all projections by definition are wrong. Thank you very much.
All right, any other discussion on this? Commissioner Farr.
Chair Buck, I may save a little bit of labor here by withdrawing my second.
Okay, so if there's no second on the original motion, we are not considering that motion at this time. Is there an alternate motion that somebody would like to make? Commissioner Burney.
Chair, before I do that, would you like to make comments before a motion is made?
I appreciate that. I can make it with your motion or not, but since you gave me the opportunity, I would like to see us get to 30 years. I wish there was an alternate choice for getting to 30 years without the use of class 1 and class 2 soils. I am really on the fence because I don't want to use those soils. At the same time, I really want to see some housing in Eugene, and we need it so desperately. I also feel there is a timeliness issue. So I don't want to belabor it so far that we're a year from now and we're still discussing this with the city and nothing's being built. That's a detriment to the whole community. But I do also feel that in the future, we are going to probably revisit this much faster than we originally think we will because of the demand of people moving to our area. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Commissioner.
I move that we accept option, staff, please correct me if I do this wrong. You know my intent. I move that we accept option number 3, which is consistent with the option that the city of Eugene has approved, and that that the Lane County Board of Commissioners and Eugene City Council revisit this decision within 10 years of its approval.
Second, and speak to the motion.
Okay. Moved by Commissioner Berney, second by Commissioner Farr. Any discussion?
Thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen. And then
I
Commissioner.
asked to speak to the motion when I made
Oh,
the
did
second.
you? I'm sorry. Go to you, Commissioner Farr.
Yeah,
first.
sorry.
Then
I
move
speak
on.
softly sometimes. And the only reason I would precede you, Commissioner Sorensen, I'm anxious to hear what you have to say, but Commissioner Berney, I would suggest 4 years instead of 10 years. And the reason I say that is because one of us sitting here just got reelected and will be here in 4 years. So to provide maybe a historical context, anything can happen in 4 years, but last Tuesday, granted 4 more years. So would you accept it friendly to say 4 years?
Congratulations, Commissioner Farr. Yes, I would.
Okay. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thanks a lot. We are, if we propose a different, as I believe the motion is to present a different option than the city adopted, then aren't we in the same position to delay this matter until the city agrees? I'd like Ms. Eichner to comment on that.
Thank you for raising that, Commissioner. So if we're provided direction to move forward on option 3, then staff can move forward on that. We will need to, as part of the adoption process, we'll be bringing an intergovernmental agreement to both the city council and back to the board. And I believe that is where we would house this direction, or I might not be saying that properly. And Rebecca, feel free to jump in, but I believe that's where we would make sure that the city and the county are in agreement on coming back.
The city hasn't placed any time limit on reviewing this, which I understand is a major focus of this motion. So wouldn't we have to then see if the city agreed to the change in the option that the city has approved? And then wouldn't that be a lengthy period of time? That was one of the criticisms of the motion I made, to have the longer period and greater protection of the farmland. So why wouldn't we just, if the board doesn't want to do that, why wouldn't we just say, we're going to propose the 27-year option. It's less of a protection than the 30-year, but it has the advantage from an efficiency standpoint of not requiring further negotiation with the city. So that's my point in saying that the motion is a good motion, but it's also against the efficiency argument that was used to defeat the more protective 30-year option that I advanced.
Point of clarification.
Yes.
The 30-year option you advanced actually did just the opposite. It did not protect farm and forest land.
Okay.
If I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Just to speak to the suggestion of including in, I believe it would be, I might punt this to either legal counsel, but I believe the direction to staff to revisit this in a time certain would be included in the county and city IGA, which we need to develop, which is actually going to be adopted administratively by the county administrator and the city manager. So I believe it feels like, but that's why I'm looking to our attorneys, that you could give us direction on what option to pursue, and then the type of wording to include in our IGA would be a staff level work that wouldn't impinge on that, to go to Commissioner Sorensen's question. That's my understanding. Emily, do you want to jump in?
Well, I want to make sure that I'm not overstepping with County Council here, but I think the simplest thing to do to move forward with your intent here, Commissioner Burney, would be to just bifurcate this into two motions. So that one motion relates to the 27-year proposal that you have made, and that would free staff up to move forward with that process. And then consider maybe making a second motion or a separate motion that talks about how soon this will be revisited. And then that could be worked out. It would need to be both the city and county agreement on that time period. And I do think it actually would be best in a plan policy, not in an intergovernmental agreement. It's a land use policy, and it should live in probably the Metro plan, which we continue to share between both jurisdictions.
So a second would be satisfied with that, Commissioner.
I actually like the motion the way that it's made. Personally, I know there's this argument that, you know, it could delay things a little bit further, but all we need is the city to agree to revisit it in 4 years. And if that's something that we really want to have happen, we would need it in the motion as stated.
Yeah,
but
if I might add, the plan right now that the county and the city are acting under involves bringing or adopting urban reserves, if that works for both jurisdictions, and then immediately going into an urban growth boundary amendment process, which would address the concerns that Commissioner Farr has raised about revisiting the need, particularly for housing. It wouldn't be terribly difficult to relook at urban reserves as part of that process, which would certainly be within the next 10 years and within the next 4 years. So I think that I don't think that this would be problematic to get agreement on, but I do agree that a motion that includes that piece would require going back to the council before anything could move forward.
Commissioner Busevich.
Thank you. And I would support removing the timeline from the motion. Yeah, I'm familiar with the compromise that came about to adopt Envision Eugene, and it included a commitment by the city to hit several timelines for reassessing their buildable lands and looking at urban growth boundary again. And our 4 years that we're just arbitrarily kind of throwing out there may not fit that. I also kind of wonder what our long range work plan is in the planning department. I'm sure Lindsay's kind of thinking, how's 4 years working that with all of our other code amendments that we have to keep constantly, updating in our own master plan updates, et cetera. I appreciate the desire to try to put a firm deadline on it in some ways, but I would think this would be better to maybe separate it, adopt option 3 so we have a clear agreement with the city around what urban reserves we're adopting are, and then maybe a separate motion asking staff to work with city staff and looking at our long range planning work plan and their work plans, and maybe come back with some agreement around when we'll be looking at urban reserves again versus when we're going to be jointly looking at buildable lands inventory and adopting any sort of change to the Eugene's UGB, which has to be co-adopted. There's a bunch of work we've already committed to with timelines. And I don't know if the 4 years of looking at urban reserves, how that fits into that. I'd rather send it to staff and have them come back with some kind of proposal of when it's logical for us to look at this again, and keep the motion clean about purely adopting option 3 to match up with the city, protects the class 1 and 2 soils, which I think what Commissioner Sorensen was hoping to get at, whereas option 1 actually would not protect the class 1 and 2 soils. And it's the option that's being recommended by the Lane County Farm Bureau.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that one of the things about density and urban density, we have to consider this in the context of what I would call the American experience as opposed to the European experience. And some of you have heard this before, that because of the emphasis on density in European cities that, of course, predate the automobile, they're much more dense than American cities, and they're certainly livable. And just to give you an idea, I've raised this before, that the population of Paris, France is about 2.1 million people, and it consumes 41 square miles of land area. Now, the city of Eugene is currently around 40.5 square miles, and 171,000 people live in those 40.5 square miles. So we have a long way to go in the United States of building livable communities that are dense and protect the farmland around those cities. And anything we can do that advances that protection is worth our time. And I appreciate the work of the county and city staff in presenting these options and making sure that we do our very best to prevent them. If we get an influx of another 2 million people into the city of Eugene, which I doubt we will do, but if we do, if we wanted to have the density of Paris, France, which I don't, just to be clear, that's too dense. And if I wanted something that dense, I'd move to Paris, France, and I don't plan to. But we should, in my view, really pay attention to the idea that we can build a lot more housing, if that's one of the goals, and I certainly believe it, build a lot more housing and enhance the livability and decrease the impact of all those people, those new people, on our carbon emissions. So thank you.
Thank you. So currently there is a motion on the floor for item number 3 with a 4-year review period. Is there, okay, Commissioner Bernie?
I'm sorry, thank you. Can you hear me? Having heard this discussion, and I found it fascinating. I think 2 things are, for me, clear. One, in the interest of moving forward, it would be good to agree with what the Eugene City Council has approved. 2, we have no clue what density requirements are going to be in 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years. My original motion said sometime before 12 years, I think, because I felt that this could get lost in the shuffle with future boards of commissioners and city councils, and it shouldn't. And that's why I put that in there. When Commissioner Farr suggested 4, I didn't have a strong feeling, because I appreciated his point, which is we may need to visit this sooner than later. And in Commissioner Bozovich's discussion, and I appreciate your sensitivity to the impacts of staff. So I'm actually directing this to Rebecca and Lindsay. I would like to keep in my motion, now I may be told I can't, but I would like to keep in my motion no less than, and 12-4, I'm going to say 10, no less than 10 years. However, that's because I don't know the internal impacts to you on the planning process. I would like that to occur way before 10 years, right? But I want to codify in there that the only way we're approving what the Eugene City Council approved is with the proviso that, or proviso, however you pronounce that in fact, we have to review it again as two bodies. And I would like there to be some kind of time frame for that. And that's the intent of the motion, really.
Your second agrees.
So my question is, does that allow staff to do what it needs to without onerous, imposition?
Can I clarify, Commissioner, are you asking us to revisit the urban reserves, the specific urban reserves designation area within that time frame, or are you looking at the urban growth boundary expansion process in that time frame?
Someone help me.
The urban reserve definitely, because the other will be revisited by a different process. But this specifically calls out the urban reserve.
Okay.
So,
if that works with your
Lindsay,
motion, Joe.
Thank you. No, thank you very much.
can I jump in with something that might be helpful? So my colleague Sophie just sent me a copy of a policy that Metro has included in their IGA, and Emily may be correct that it might work better as a plan policy, but their wording is something like a policy that the county will review the designations, I'm changing it for us, of urban reserves in coordination with the city. They chose 20 years after the adoption of reserves by the governments pursuant to this agreement, unless the governments agree to review the reserves sooner. Now, what I heard from you is 10 years. I don't know what the right date is. I know that we need to have our next housing needs assessment completed by 2026, which is our urban growth boundary process, completed by 2026. So as Commissioner Bozovich noted, depending on when this gets adopted, we will likely be in the middle of an urban growth boundary process in 4 years. So that feels a little too soon. 10 years may make more sense. I just want to also throw out that at any point, the county and the city can direct staff to revisit urban reserves designations. I do understand your intention to codify it a little bit. I see Emily's popped her video back on.
I just want to make sure, I'm sorry, Commissioner Buck, am I acknowledged at this point?
Yes, I was going to go ahead and give you the floor.
Sorry. I just want to be clear that we understand the intent of the board in this posture. I think I understand it, but for clarification, we're here today to ask you the same question we asked the City Council, which is, how should we proceed through a public process? Which product should we take out, prepare for the Planning Commission and your review for final adoption? And so your answer to that question, I think with this motion, is the 27-year option, if and only if the City Council agrees that urban reserves will be reviewed within, and at this point, 4 years.
It was changed to 10 years, just a little bit.
10 years. Okay, so I just want to be clear about that, that these are not, that you're not saying, you're saying if the council doesn't agree to the 10-year, then the 27-year direction is no longer your direction. And that's why I say we would need to bring it back to the city council to make sure they're okay with that caveat if these remain together. So if you could just clarify that really is the intent, I think it would help in terms of moving forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Berney, I just want to make sure that I heard it right too before you restate your motion in full so Diana can catch it. I heard not if and only if, but I heard and. So if you could clarify that for a full statement so Diana can catch the motion, that'd be helpful.
If and only if and. What's the difference between if and only if and and.
Well, one sounds like an ultimatum. The other one sounds like we'd also like to do this.
Well, forgive me. The intent would be that we would, that the intent honestly was if and only if. And I may be the only person here that feels that way. I'm not speaking for the whole board, but again, let me just state, and Emily was, I can't see you. Are you the person that restated, that just spoke? Someone just spoke and clarified my intention. Maybe. Okay, yes. And you were correct. Again, I'm not saying this will move through. I'm only speaking for myself. Let's get to yes so the planners can move forward. And let's put an addition in there that we are approving this with the provision that within 10 years, both bodies will revisit the realities on the ground. What housing prices are, how many units are being produced, right? Where they're being produced, so we can see whether or not we're honing in on reality or not. And that's the reason I put that in there. But that's just speaking for me. That was the intent of the motion, to get to yes and to identify that we will be accountable with that yes within 10 years.
And
thank you. For the second, I think that Rebecca's citation of the Metro agreement sounded very close to what we're looking for, with the exchanging tenures now for the 20 years as cited in the Metro agreement. So the 20 moving option 3, but then as a separate motion, the citation very similar to the Metro agreement that Rebecca read to us.
So I want to just clarify, Commissioner Farr, you were reiterating 2 separate motions. Commissioner Burney, and the one that's on the floor at the moment is one motion. I will
agree with the maker of the motion, whether the maker chooses to go with a single motion or with 2 separate motions. 2 separate motions may expedite it through the city council more quickly, but absolutely making certain that the second part of it is inherent in the direction that we're proceeding as a county.
Okay. Any more discussion? We got a lot going on here.
Because we're going to need to deliver this back to the city, I want to just make sure I'm completely clear. And county council.
If you are, you're doing better than us. I'm just being silly. I'm sorry.
It's really important that we are able to deliver the proper message back, and that you all know what you're voting on, of course. But it sounds like you're moving the motion number 3 on the first page of your AIS, of your agenda summary that Lindsay provided. So to support the Eugene City Council's initiation of a public review and adoption process, including but not limited to comprehensive plan and code amendments, and to consider establishment of urban reserves for the city of Eugene as described in option 3, the 27-year option. So that would move forward through the process for your consideration. And then, oh, I lost everything. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna keep talking. Can't see. And then also, I think what you would say is adding to the end of that, so long as the proposal includes a comprehensive plan or intergovernmental agreement provision that requires reconsideration of urban reserves within 10 years of the UG's expansion.
Commissioner Burney, as the maker of the motion, does that sound like the motion you want to make?
Yes, it does.
And okay by the second.
As a second, it doesn't cite exactly the same as the Metro agreement, but it's close enough, yes.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, I don't see any, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Please say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you to the city and Lindsay for helping us get through that.
Yes, thank you very much.
Right, we have a few final items for our morning agenda. County Council, if you are on the phone, are there any announcements?
Chair Buck, there is are 2 executive sessions. I didn't know if the board wanted to do one of them now or just wait. I did want to make the board aware, and I let Ms. Jones know that I had a motion scheduled that was supposed to go yesterday, but got moved to today because the judge had internet issues. So Mr. Cheney will take up the one about real property before mine, just to make sure in case my motion runs long that I'll be there for the opioid litigation.
Okay, I have a noon meeting, so I wouldn't be able to do it at noon.
All right.
So I was planning on doing these in the afternoon.
Okay.
Okay. Any other announcements?
No,
Okay.
Chair.
Mr. Mokryski, any admin announcements?
I'll just give you a brief, because I know you have, did you say, Chair, that you have a meeting at noon today?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll be brief. Just a quick elections recap. Election day stats, voter turnout is currently at 82% based on over 225,000 ballots received, which is really great. We received 458 phone calls on election day, issued 236 replacement ballots and 36 provisional ballots, assisted 154 customers who updated their registration on election day to receive and vote a ballot. Over 700 customers came in to vote or deposit their ballot in the elections office on elections day. The election will be certified no later than Monday, November 23rd, 2020. Post-election activities include processing 851 qualified ballots coming to Lane County from other Oregon counties. This happens occasionally where someone will deposit a Lane County ballot in another, but it's received by another county elections office. We sent 1,989 qualified ballots to other Oregon counties that were sent to Lane County's election office. Final staff review of unaccepted ballots prior to the list being made public is on Thursday, November 12th. In preparation for the write-in tally of 3 no candidate filed positions. A special thanks, and I will also note, as Commissioner Sorensen noted, we do have a new commissioner. Express our appreciation both to Lori Trieger and Jolie Boa for their efforts in that election, and congratulations to Ms. Trieger for what appears to be a successful election and victory as a new county commissioner. Also to Commissioner Farr, as Commissioner Farr noted, we were all on pins and needles watching the returns for his election. I'm being facetious there. I think over 90%, as he didn't have an opponent in the general, as well as Sheriff Harold, who was elected to his first term officially, and of course DA Patty Perlow won her election in May, and so congratulations to the 3 of you for your re-elections. And then a special thanks to volunteer managers, supervisors at the end who volunteered for end-of-line monitoring. These are folks who go to each of the 20 official Dropbox sites and they stand in line, and so that they're at the Dropbox at exactly 8 o'clock, and then they shut it down so that no one can turn their ballot in past 8 o'clock on those evenings. Mr. Rickoff, Greg Rickoff, our director of operations, was in Oak Ridge at the Oak Ridge Dropbox site doing just that task. We also want to thank the Lane County Sheriff's Office, the University of Oregon, and city law enforcement from Coburg, Cottage Grove, Eugene, Florence, Junction City, Oak Ridge, and Springfield for assisting us in our elections work in what turned out to be a peaceful and non-eventful election from a public safety standpoint. And we appreciate county staff from facilities and technology services and the countless others who provided ongoing support throughout the election. Many people stepped up to assist the county clerk staff, and all of that is greatly appreciated. So that's my elections report. Happy to answer any questions you may have. We are cooperating, as we always do, with the state elections division. And we are on track again to certify the election no later than November 23rd, 2020. That's it, Chair.
Good. Any questions? Commissioner Bozich.
Thank you. I just wanted to state quickly, I got a question about the accuracy of our ballot counting machines that I forwarded on to our clerk, Cheryl Betchard, and her response to that, one of the things I remembered was that I thought we audited them both before and after the elections. And her response to me was, that is correct. We complete a logic and accuracy test 2 times before the election and once after the election. All the totals are compared to ensure that they match. Plus, I have to reconcile the election, confirming the number of ballots received equals the number of cast ballots accepted plus unaccepted. That balancing report is filed with the Secretary of State's office when the election is certified. In addition, we are required to complete an administrative hand count after the election is certified. Those hand counts must match the machine tabulated counts. None of these things are new, but all are completed to ensure that tabulation is accurate and that we can be confident in that they're tabulated correctly. I just wanted to read that real quick just to assure folks that those machines we're using to count the ballots are accurate, and they're audited and double checked and certified. So what you see coming out of our elections office with results can be counted on.
Thank you. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. I wanted Mr. Mokreisky to give us the detail on when the election will be certified. I know there's a state requirement for that coming up in November, later this month. And I was wondering if you could give us any insight. Will that be done ahead of the statutory deadline? Will it be done on the statutory deadline? What is the statutory deadline?
No later than November 23rd.
And is it
so
common
we are
that
on track? I can't give you a date for when exactly it will happen. I can report that once it is completed, but it will be no later than November 23rd.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We will move our executive sessions to the evening. Gives me a moment to have my noon NACO Transportation Steering Committee meeting. Unfortunate that it lies once a month on a Tuesday when we're already in our meetings, but that's the way it goes. Any final other business for this morning? I don't see any. Okay, we'll be in recess until 1:30. Thank you.